This is crucial. This is a crucial conversation, especially for men. This is me making it plain from a conversation I had back and forth with a commenter in the DigiTribe. Again, DigiTribe is a real living, breathing space, bro. I want y'all to understand that. It's not just like, you know, posts. It's people who are grouping or working together, organizing, doing community stuff. You know, shout out to DigiTribe, man. We're growing. We're real. I appreciate y'all. We're living, breathing. It's not just me. We're a community. And I know y'all feel that. And even if you're not, man, you know, you can be a part of DigiTribe just by watching here and joining in. You can join the Facebook group if you want. You can see all those links on my main page, or you just vibe in by just being here. You know what I mean? So here we go. The destruction of the patriarchy. Why this is important, and in particular for me, why it matters is why we must, when we say protect black women, the only way we can truly do that is through eradication and replacement through a solution that would have to be something that would work. And we, you know, how we would do that. This is, again, pie in the sky utopian. Well, I don't care whether it's utopian or not. It's something that will have to happen, in my opinion, for the future of humanity, in my opinion. So this is a humanist principle. The architecture of Misogynoir.
If her bridge collapses once, you blame the driver. If it collapses 11 times a week, you examine the architecture. This chart tracks domestic homicides in the United States. Every week, roughly 11 murder-suicides occur. For Black women, the rate is 11.6 per 100,000, a level of legal risk that far exceeds any other demographic. When confronted with these numbers, the public reflex is to individualize the tragedy. We ask why she chose him or why she didn't leave sooner. This shifts the focus away from a systemic design that teaches men.
What's going on? So I want to start with that. That's some of the feedback I got with, again, I say, okay, we must destroy the patriarchy. Why must you destroy it? That sounds very hot topic, very cliche. That means the removal of the assumption of men, any man, black man, men, having dominion and power and control over women, right? And so it's just true gender egalitarianism, meaning equity for all. And all options and accessibility at spaces in life. This is going to tell you why it's the most detrimental to black women in particular, who gets the cards triple stacked. And for those of us that come from black women, you should be in the front lines. I want to defend this and understanding why this is not sustainable. This patriarchy is not sustainable. That's why.
That they are entitled to ownership and control. Intimate partner violence is the micro-manifestation of a macro-level patriarchal structure. That structure is reinforced by a legal and economic foundation that strips black women of their autonomy long before they enter a room with an abuser. This structural invisibility was codified in 1976 when 5 black women sued General Motors for discrimination. The company's seniority-based layoffs targeted them specifically because they had been the last hired due to prior exclusion. The court dismissed the suit. Because GM hired white women for clerical work and black men for the factory floor, the judge ruled that no specific discrimination based on race or gender had occurred.
Look at that unique missed, as they call, blind spot. Pay attention to that.
The legal system lacked the vocabulary to comprehend discrimination against the specific intersection of being a black woman. By treating race and gender as mutually exclusive, the court ensured that these women fell through the cracks of the law. This case led Kimberly Crenshaw to formulate the framework of intersectionality. It was designed to map exactly where these distinct power structures collide.
This is really what intersectionality really means. So this is hopefully, again, educating y'all too on what this means and why it's actually important. I didn't know this and realize this until really a couple years ago, being honest. So it takes time, man, for people to be open and aware.
And interlock. Without this lens, justice remains a single access pursuit, one that inevitably marginalizes anyone navigating more than one vector of oppression. This compounding pressure is known as misogynoir. It is a synergistic hostility, a specific brand of anti-black racism and patriarchy that creates a unique...
Which I want to pause and say, shout out to the great sister, Moya Bailey, Moya. Because I knew it. We went to either, I think we were in Dark Tower or we were in some joint group together at Spelman, and I was in a class, I can't remember if it was jazz class. I had tons of incredible classes when I Spelman, when I was at the AUC, shout out Morehouse. And I was taking classes at Spelman through cross registration, which is an incredible program. That's how I met some of my best people through Clark, and a great experience at Spelman. And I believe we had a class together, but she coined the term misogynoir, you know? So little known fact, man, I believe we had a class together, Moya Bailey. She actually coined the term.
Unique environment of systemic deprivation, navigating more than one vector of oppression. This compounding pressure is known as misogynoir. It is a synergistic hostility, a specific brand of anti-black racism and patriarchy that creates a unique environment of systemic deprivation. Consider the economic trap of the 1944 GI Bill. While it was marketed as a race-neutral path to the middle class, its benefits were funneled through local authorities who enforced strict racial and gendered boundaries. White women gained wealth through marriage to white veterans, and black men managed marginal gains in industrial training. But over 332,000 eligible black female veterans were doubly excluded, blocked by the hostility of segregated banks and the patriarchal assumption that women did not need independent financial power. Today, this same architecture shows up in the medical system. Black women suffer 50 maternal deaths per 100,000 live births, the highest.
This is a big deal. Like the maternal system and its impact on black women, huge.
Rate in the developed world. A black woman with a college degree is still more likely to die in childbirth than a white woman who didn't finish high school. In the exam room,
an educated black woman is more likely to die than a white woman who never finished college. What? That means a black woman who has money. That's a black woman who has money. A black woman who has money, graduated college, more like, bro.
Status and education do not provide immunity against the systemic dismissal of a patient's pain. From historical wealth building to modern obstetrics, American institutions are functionally reliant on the devaluation of black female life to maintain the status quo. The historical movements for equality often ignored these intersections. Early white feminism focused on securing a share of institutional power for white, middle-class women, sequently at the expense of racial justice. Simultaneously, black liberation movements often demanded that women prioritize race over gender.
Right.
Leaders frequently dismissed calls for gender equality as a divisive distraction from the goal of racial unity. When movements challenge racial barriers without dismantling patriarchal ones, the resulting liberation,
which is real. So a lot of those black liberation movements, even early stuff I've talked about in previous Kwanzaa videos, you can see my Kwanzaa, I think most important and compounded and really thought through and thorough deep dive into Kwanzaa and its actual origins and community and black liberation and the pitfalls of it, which of course definitely were patriarchal leanings that other orgs went to evolve beyond, and of course some of the more successful ones people don't even know about. So anyway, I digress.
Is lopsided. Marginalized men may gain proximity to power, but the women in those same communities remain relegated to a subordinate status. Scholars in black male studies correctly identify that black men are uniquely targeted by mass incarceration and state violence. They represent the highest per capita demographic for police homicide and systemic homelessness. Yet, the trauma of state-sanctioned racial violence often coexists with the assertion of patriarchal power in domestic spaces. Being victimized by white supremacy does not negate a man's capacity to exert dominance over the women in his life. Black
It's a bar. Being empowered, being suppressed, oppressed by white supremacy does not negate them asserting the same power mechanism dynamics, but in their relationship, but in, the man-woman aspect, which is an extreme. It's not happening as frequent, but it exists in society. That's the fabric that's creating, I believe, all of this worldwide trauma.
Thinkers built their own frameworks of resistance to address this double bind. In 1977, the Combahee River Collective declared a radical new premise for liberation. They argued that any revolutionary project that fails to address racism, sexism, and capitalism simultaneously is a flawed and incomplete mission. This requires deconstruction.
Agreed. I agree 1,000%. You're just talking about black liberation. You're not having women with their liberation and capacity to be free and to do whatever they want. Then... yeah, that's not real liberation. Because again, they're the gods of this earth. Women birth life. Yeah, we are part of that, but they birth. That's literally God. I mean, the 5%ers say the black woman is God. I mean, the shit is real, bro.
Constructing the strong black woman schema. While praised as a virtue, this expectation forces black women to act as shock absorbers for systemic abuse, denying them vulnerability or institutional support. Relying on internalized endurance or respectability politics places the burden of safety on the victim. It asks them to modify their behavior to fit a system that was designed to exclude them in the first place. A multidimensional approach redefines what it means to be a feminist. In hood feminism, survival needs, food security, living wages, and affordable housing are treated as the paramount issues. This lens also rejects carceral feminism, seeking protection from a policing system built on racial profiling and punitive force.
Which I respect it. In this particular form of feminism, as it speaks to, it's not, calling the cops. It's essentially about community self-policing. But then also men holding other men accountable, which would be in a truly deconstructing of a patriarchal framework of people getting out of line and niggas step up and they get, that's what it would be in a real society that truly protected women, in particular black women.
Often triggers a second wave of state violence against the women the law claims to protect. Real protection requires macro-level shifts, fully funding domestic violence shelters, and enacting laws that immediately remove firearms from anyone with a history of coercive control. Fighting racism without destroying patriarchal hierarchies leaves the architectural blueprint for subjugation completely intact.
I mean, the truth is like that's where niggas like to get it off online, because in their own lives, they probably really don't be like that, talking crazy to their wives or girlfriends or whatever. Or if they do, they're just toxic weirdos. You know what I'm saying? So you have a combination of people who are cosplayers. They cosplay toxic masculinity people. In real life, they're true and not even like good. Saying they're just fucking. And then you got people who really, you know, weirdo. They bring that same energy in real life, man. So the moral of the story is this is something you need to start grappling with. Why do you feel so entitled to having to have this title of the man and instruction? Doesn't mean we don't support. Doesn't mean there's not husbands and father, you know, father figure. Doesn't mean any of that. It means now we reevaluate what does that structure mean, and how do we make sure it fully is not only protective and supportive, and then most importantly, particularly of Black diasporic women who are the most disenfranchised and harmed on this fucking planet. You feel me?
Total liberation isn't about winning a seat at a broken table. It is about demolishing the hierarchical architecture to build something that shelters everyone.
So if there is a digital companion to go with this that has even more of a better breakdown or visual breakdown, infographic, talk to some of the same data. Intersectionality, misogynoir, definition, a unique synergistic anti-Black racist misogyny experienced by Black women. Misogyny relies heavily on historical controlling images, again, using racism. Again, you can see this visual of what's the cards stacked on Black women in particular. Double exclusion, denied by racial hostility from segregated institutions and the patriarchal belief that women did not require advanced degrees or independent home ownership. Okay. Liberation is asymmetrical without the destruction of patriarchy. So this will be a link available. I will post up in the YouTube. Just hope that you learned something, man, and gather something from this deep dive.